Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the EchoStor Microsoft Minute. My name is Steve Caprio. I'm a solutions architect here in our modern workplace practice and a technical lead. I'm joined by Chuck Salvo, as always, who is our field CTO for Microsoft Modern Workplace, and he's on our innovation team here as well. So, Chuck, obviously, the last time we had one of these, we had talked about what we were looking at heading into the Ignite conference. You and I both attended remotely, so we weren't there in person, and certainly had a good time looking through the session catalog and listening to what was happening. It's always good to get the download. It's obviously hammered by the word Copilot quite a bit during any of the sessions. So
Some Copilot? We got some Copilot.
yeah,
Some Copilot.
we'll have some fun talking about that. But yeah, why don't we just give me your thoughts on the high notes and the keynote? Really, we could start there from
Yeah.
Satya and the rest of the gang about what they're focused on technically coming into 2025 here.
Very impressive keynote by Satya. Like, it's amazing. The guy just understands his entire product catalog, everything they're doing. So a couple things that I thought were really amazing. First off, the fact that Microsoft is producing their own silicone, right? So they talked about these different chips. They're talking about stuff. They're replacing chipsets in the data center in Azure to give them better performance. And continuing with that, right down to the Windows or the M365 link, right? The little kind of Weiss terminal. If you remember the old Weiss terminal back in the day, right? Very slick. We see a lot of customers that are doing VDI implementations and whatnot. And the fact that you can basically buy that little box, deploy something like that with minimal administration and get a user into a cloud-based VDI, another great solution. Obviously, Copilot agents, talking to agents and all that good stuff. We're going to move on. We'll talk about that stuff, but there are other amazing things. A big one, Microsoft Fabric right now has native SQL databases. So I don't need to run an Azure SQL. I can run those databases right inside of Fabric. It's available to the catalog and everything else. So that to me was, another big improvement there.
They're certainly making that easier to adopt. I think too, the big one for me is just going to be, can they make the licensing simpler, more attractive? I thought that it's like Power BI premium capacity licensing, that there's levels to it. And you mentioned in a couple of our other customer calls about the scaling features that it has to go up and down. But yeah, again, like some of the licensing stuff, it just feels like they could tighten that up or make it more approachable. So we'll see what they do there. But F64, right, is the one that includes
F64 is the golden child, right? You get, surprising, you get Copilot, and then you remove that capacity limit for licensing, right? Everyone in the organization at that point gets Power BI Pro. So,
and that's if you have a lot of people that are looking at Power BI for reporting and building reports or looking at dashboards, Power BI Pro is a necessity, and F64 gets you to the point where you don't have to worry about individual licenses for that. Right.
Yeah. And again, now if you're moving your SQL loads into that drives that capacity even higher and gets you closer to that spot of, hey, it's just one SKU you're paying for every month, and you have a complete BI stack that supports now operational transactional databases.
Well, are they charging anything different for storing like SQL in that space, or does it all just come down to, can the capacity level that you're at support the size of the SQL database that you're putting in there? Is that kind of the way they're running it, or is there separate?
I didn't get too in depth with the storage piece to it. I'm assuming they're going to look at it the same exact way. It's just part of the one lake storage. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see exactly how they get into the pricing. Yeah. Again, you're just moving all of that consumption into one piece, making it energy easy to find, all that stuff.
We could do a follow-up session on that, because I think that's an interesting one too, to save on, if you'd previously been spinning up like a platform as a service instance of SQL to be used against it, like that has costs associated with it too. Is it cheaper to just throw it in Fabric?
And again, from a development perspective, once it's in Fabric, it's in the catalog, right? So it's in Lake, it's available to everyone. So development now becomes that much easier. So there was a lot of stuff that I did attend a couple of Fabric sessions. That was obviously one of the biggest ones. Another great one that I saw was the write back feature inside of Power BI. So this is absolutely brand new. We've never had this before. So everything in Power BI was always read only, right? So you didn't really have a way to interact with the data per se.
Yeah.
Now you have the ability to actually go in there, connect to the data source, create a field, create an action, call a stored procedure, updates the data, and gets refreshed back in Power BI. So they had a really slick demo where they were showing like connectivity into dynamic CRM, and they were changing pricing levels, and they were changing the order status, and it was updating real time inside the dashboard. So
They have I didn't attend that session and maybe they didn't get into it. So we again, another follow-up maybe for us is how do they control like versioning in that sense of what if it's a mistake or what if something happened that from a price like it changed the price and or changed a data point that maybe you weren't looking for it to change. Is there like a review? Can you go backwards in time to prevent that? Or is it so purposeful that it would be difficult for you to fall into a automated mistake that way?
if you, so it's action driven, right? So you have
Yeah.
to, you tie a button and then the button calls an action. And the action, you basically set up the parameters. So there isn't an approval per se.
Yeah.
You'd have to put something in a database level, a record level, record keeping to do some sort of audit log to roll something
Yeah.
back, but
Yeah.
nothing out of the box just yet.
But I love that as a feature because there's plenty of use cases
Oh,
where
yeah.
you had the need to just manually go and do something like that or build a separate workflow in Power Automate or something to
Yeah.
achieve that. Now that's built in, it seems like a no-brainer.
That's great because you can start getting into the what if scenarios, right? So, okay, here's my customers. What if we gave them a 5% discount? What does that look like for my P&L and everything else? And get it real time versus extract it, do some Excel junk, bring it back in and all that
Yeah,
happiness.
yeah. Just real quick, jumping back to the other part of the keynote about the link devices for Windows 365. I think the other story there is just how much easier it is to manage the security and compliance of those devices from like an information governance standpoint
Yes.
versus having to allow certain devices to port through on a laptop saying connecting to Windows 365, right? Where you're creating these policies that allow USB pass through, but you're not sure if it's a USB stick or if it's encrypted or not. And or if it's just a headset that somebody's plugging in. So I think having a terminal that allows people to connect to this, prevents a lot of the need to try to figure out how laptops might connect to it and what laptops they're coming from and can they download data from the VDI, from the Windows 365 instance. It creates a easier pathway to have a really secure solution there. I think on top of it just being the way that you always need some type of device, whether it's the user's own laptop or corporate issued laptop, which seems silly to have a corporate issued laptop accessing a Windows 365 desktop, but there are use cases for it.
But like we should say, right? It's always better when the data stays on prem or in the data center and not out in the wild on a device that might get lost. So
Yep.
I didn't see the
Yeah.
cost on those. Did you?
No, I didn't either. I actually, besides the announcement part of it, I didn't attend any specific sessions about it. I did some reading about it afterwards, but I probably should go back and look. The session catalog's enormous, and there's probably still stuff I'd like to catch up on and read through. But yeah, I think following up on that is one of the key ones here as we continue to talk to customers about ABD, the complexity of ABD too. Like sometimes that fits, right? Like how many different images and different things that I want to roll out, or in having different policies apply to different virtual desktops. Sometimes ABD is the right play, but if you're trying to avoid some of that complexity, the story's always been around Windows 365. So just get me a desktop, have it be
Yep.
flexible. I can spin it down. I don't have to worry about all the infrastructure stuff associated with it. So
Absolutely. All right. So should we talk Copilot?
yeah, we're going to talk Copilot now.
All right.
So one of the sessions that you and I had highlighted beforehand coming into it was Better Together, Copilot Studio, and Azure
Oh.
AI. And it was a good session. They highlighted Azure Foundry and some of the things that we'll talk through here. But they highlighted how Copilot Studio and leveraging the full Azure AI capabilities is really where you can make some compelling applications and compelling chatbots and really some solutions that benefit the business. So they had a customer story, which is common for these sessions
It's a
from ABN.
dashboard, right?
Yeah, they had it from ABN AMRO Bank, and I took a screenshot of a particularly, I don't want to say like interesting because I mean it is interesting naturally, but I think you and I in working with Copilot Studio have always felt that just using it out of the box and trying to build stuff, it's been a little bit kludgier, the connections and stuff, or maybe it doesn't do everything we want it to. But I think what the customer story has taught me at least is there's to make this a complete solution and one that really works for customers, there's just a lot that you have to think about and put on paper and build ultimately to have this work. It's not going to all click buttony out of the box, all
Just the
floating.
next thing.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm going to bring it up. We'll talk through it. All of you give your thoughts on it here and we can just discuss it.
This is a great solution. So we'll start right at the middle, right? Copilot Studio. What is Copilot Studio really giving you? It's giving you the ability to have a chat bot and connect those channels. Teams, right? When we're deploying these, we're always deploying this inside of Teams, but you could deploy it to a website, Facebook, Slack, right? Whatever channel you want. So Copilot Studio gives you the plumbing, but it's all the stuff around you that's really the amazing stuff that's going on here. So we'll start with bottom right, analytics, Power BI, right? So they're using Power BI to analyze what's going on. And they're also using Data Lake to basically grab the conversation, the transcripts for post analysis. So that's a great thing, right? Because you want to improve on this. You want to see what's going on. The next one here is really the engine, right? AI generated answers from Azure AI Studio, which is now Azure AI Foundry. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But that's being powered by Azure AI Search. Azure AI Search has grown tremendously over the last couple of years. In fact, they just announced Disk-In, which is a performance optimization for vectorization, right? So you'll see there, they've got vectorized indexes. So Disk-In, they just announced it's going to give you even better performance, lower cost, and the ability to vectorize more information. If you're not familiar with what a vector is, you're going to need to learn that word because AI is powered by vectorization, basically turning words into numbers so that a computer can understand it. We'll talk about it some other time. Going to the left, right? More Azure services, Azure AI Speech, Azure Communication Services. So again, bringing that whole stack in and then pushing it through, you'll see the middleware. They just call it Azure, but the reality is it's their own proprietary APIs, whatnot, that are cleaning up the data. So this to me is an outstanding solution because it's really bringing together all these different pieces of Azure and bringing it to the end user, right? So you can see they've got chat, they've got voice. So they got multiple channels to go in and communicate with this and service the customer. So this, when you talk about an AI solution, this is awesome. This is not just Copilot. This is just Copilot Studio being that piece of the chatbot that can bring all these things together.
I think too, like the middleware, it's oversimplified. Like you said, they just call it Azure. There's a lot in there. I think the importance of kind of having that there to clean up the data from that. They mentioned PII here, right? That's the concern, right? Is customer on the phone or customer in the chat accidentally gives PII that you don't necessarily need, or purposely gives it. You don't want that to be stored or shared or with any backend services other than to potentially find a record associated with that customer, but cleaning that up after the fact and having good auditing and governance capabilities over what this looks like. And I think especially, I think this customer, especially being in, I think they're in Europe. I don't know where they're headquartered, but I know that they service an international community, the GDPR stuff being a big deal, right? Of where data sits and customers being able to retract their data. That stuff's all in play here as well. Complex solution for complex or large entity. So not every customer kind of fits this mold of being able to build something out like this or have this specific use case. But I think to what we've been trying to figure out is this is the level of detail that you probably need to go down to have a solution that really delivers on everything any customer needs. It can't really just be serviced out of Copilot Studio and a few connectors to the 365 or SharePoint or even some of the Azure AI Studio, right? You got to think about all pieces of this probably.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially like when you're talking about an enterprise deployment. Now, if you're a smaller organization, you could just go out there and deploy Copilot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now one of the things that we're seeing is this notion of agents. One of my big takeaways on this is Microsoft is pushing for everyone to buy Copilot, right? We know this, we hear it, Copilot. But what they're offering right now is if you have 30 licenses of Copilot, you can then get Copilot agents on your SharePoint site. And they're basically doing this as part of SharePoint Premium. So you're getting SharePoint Premium for free for your organization just by committing to 30 Copilot licenses. That'll get you basically from now till June of 2025. You get 6 months of SharePoint Premium, which has some amazing features. One of them is fillable columns using AI. So you can write a prompt. When a document gets uploaded, it'll run the prompt against the document and fill the column. So you might have something that says, what is the purpose of this document? And AI can read it, generate it, put it in a column and metadata. And now you can see it without having to open the document. So some cool stuff with that. The other thing too is you're seeing agents talking to agents now. So when the agents are in the ecosystem, the Copilot can basically access that. But I think one of the things we talked about Azure AI Foundry, I'd like to share a few things that I grabbed. Azure AI Foundry is the next thing. But here's the one that I really want to focus on. Now we have this huge model catalog, right? So LLMs, right? Large language models are what drives AI. Everyone's familiar with ChatGPT. But there's also all these other models out there that have specific functionalities, capabilities, and whatnot. So it's interesting. Microsoft does have some of their own models, but you are seeing that Microsoft is really focusing on Azure AI as a hosting of models, right? So whether they're small ones, large ones, whatever it is, specific preference. To me, this is a great thing right here. You can go out there and pick the model that works best depending on the workload that you're trying to do. There's some medical models out there now. There's genetic models. There's all sorts of different models out there that are specific built for your vertical. So there's some great stuff with that. So when we talk about models, I just want to bring this up so people understand what goes into some of this, right? So you can take your model and you can get into prompt engineering, right? Few shot, zero shot, different techniques. We talked about RAG before, right? Retrieval augmented generation. Fine tuning is another thing, right? Distillation, compressing technique where we take a small model to replicate response to a large model. So you can train on a large model and transfer that to a small model and reduce your costs. There's also basically reinforced learning and then custom models. But all these different things are what's available to you, again, inside of Azure Foundry now to get a better solution. And we're seeing it, right? It's not amazing out of the box on any of these. They take some work, they take some tuning. It takes a lot to get more out of it. But I think for any organization out there, you do want to start with Copilot. That is your entryway into the future of all these different things. So I think it's a crawl, walk, run. When you start getting to this level, you're running, and you're running because you're generating a lot of value. You're generating a lot of knowledge and getting more out of these AI solutions. So,
Yeah. I think the way we've approached it with customers too is that sometimes it's about getting areas of the business that aren't always talking about like strategy together, right? The IT folks talking to the business facing entities of the organization, not from a, hey, what hardware do you need? What applications do you need? But like, how should we think about all of this sort of and have more like strategic conversations like that? And that's helped to understand what do you guys spend a lot of your time on? I know I deliver this application to you and I know it does X, Y, and Z, but what are the pain points inside of that? That might not always get filtered back to the IT folks. And therefore, what solutions exist out there to in the AI space, Copilot space, model space, what's available to fix those problems for you. And knowing that there's a significant either time savings, cost savings, business improvement that can be accomplished by this for cost and TCO is part of this, right? Like, and return on investment and ROI and all these things is important to understand. But if you're not even talking about what's available and what's out there, tough to even get to that part of it. So I think to your point, Copilot's a great entryway. But the way we've been running any of the Copilot engagements that we've done has been about getting those business units together to talk more broadly about what are some of the things that we're running into. What do you think AI is and how can it help you? And maybe IT and assistance from us and other folks can get you in the right direction to find a solution or build a solution that drastically improves some area that was previously not efficient or cost effective.
yeah, without a doubt, there's so much automation. There's so much integration now with all these different technologies that, you know, you can definitely get higher value quicker and easier. You're not writing custom code all the time. We're talking about low code, no code, automation, using AI to build things. So absolutely.
I think the real
Things.
danger of any customer we go talk to is if they just go pick up Copilot, the one that shows up in Teams or the one that shows up as attached to Outlook or any of the applications, is there real use cases for that. But if you're looking for that thing to be revolutionary or changing your business, this is really not what it's there for anyway. It's
Not
meant to
yet.
be like a virtual assistant, right? I think one of the best things in Outlook is that it'll summarize meetings for me or like email threads if I have things in conversation view. Like that's a basic functionality. It improves my day, but it doesn't change the way that we do things. I think one of my frustrations with it is I'll ask it to draft me an email and it sounds like it's coming from AI. Like it hasn't yet learned the way I write. It hasn't learned the way, like, even if I prompt it to do it differently, somebody's going to know that I didn't write that email. And if I don't have time to answer a customer's email with my own words, like, then that doesn't look very good either. So I think some of that stuff is
Nobody
where,
wants an automated AI response.
yeah. So I think people pick that up and they just say, not really what I'm looking for, and I'll push it to the side. But they are missing that whole second part of the conversation of if it doesn't work right out of the box with this, what are you trying to solve for? I'm sure that there's a way you can build it in Copilot Studio or with agents or with SharePoint Premium. Like it can do things for you. You just have to get to that deeper level conversation, not just turn on the tool and watch it mess with your calendar and summarize a meeting for you.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of frustration, I would say, for the users that we've seen because there's this notion of, oh, it's AI, it'll do everything. Perfect example. I think I've shown you this. Hey, what do I have for free time next week? When I give it a great prompt, and no matter what, it always makes mistakes. So you wonder where the value is. And that's one of the things that I think organizations struggle with. It does do amazing things, right? Text summarizations, creating content, even Excel now in the wave 2 with Python actually has some cool functionality,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's not the end all be all. And
Yeah.
I think if users don't understand what the limitations are, they're going to get frustrated. They'll start looking at it and saying, what's the value? I'm spending $30 a month. I'm like, as long as you get an hour a week, you're getting value out of it. But it's how do you get that hour, if not more? So
Right.
yeah, and it's like you say, at the end of the day, our job in IT is to understand what the business needs and taking what tool set we have to help solve that problem. And that just means going in and being like, all right, what are you trying to do here? And how do we help you? And being able to say, honestly, yes, this will do it, or that won't do it. But we have a path to solve that problem. Like you say, elevating to Copilot Studio, build a custom solution and solve the business need.
Yeah. The calendar one's so funny because like I'll get a customer email with dates and times that work for them. And then
Yeah.
there's a little button, like I'm sure people have used it where it says other reply actions. And they've now got one where it says schedule with Copilot. It ignores all of the dates and times that are in the email and goes off of what's of your calendar
Yeah.
availability. Now, granted, it's nice that it brings it up and it even puts my calendar and it gives me an open slot. It'd be nice if it had read the email and said, okay, these are the dates I have to choose from.
Yeah.
Like what works for your calendar. That's simplification, right? We're waiting on that next step of easy out of the box stuff. But to your point, that stuff gets fixed and people might not go back and see it. So it's, unless you're doing it every single day and trying to get the most out of that tool, you might end up with the frustration. But yeah, just I don't want to complain about it too much because it's cool. All this stuff is really cool. I think just from a customer facing standpoint, we really got to figure out how to sell the value prop here.
We want the end user to be satisfied and happy with the product and feel like they're being productive. If they're fighting with how do I write the prompt and they're spending an hour to fix something that should have taken 15 minutes, you're actually going backwards. Right.
Yeah.
So let's not do that. Let's not
Yeah.
be frustrated. Let's find the spots where Copilot's going to succeed and build from there.
Yeah. Chuck and I joked earlier about a blog that everything that wasn't Copilot had at
Short
Ignite.
list.
And we'll just put together some sessions that maybe weren't as focused there, but important. And we'll put that out into the EchoStor blog and get it out to the public there. I think that one will just be important of just like, here's the other things that they're talking about and work out security
Other
focused things.
technologies.
Yeah, other technologies, some Azure stuff, probably on the infrastructure as a service or platform as a service side. But yeah, I think otherwise, good conference. I think the Copilot stuff, a lot to weed through, but otherwise, I think you and I are looking forward to maybe getting back out in person to one of these next year. Just didn't
Yeah.
work out timing wise for us this year. So maybe we'll do like a video from out there or something next year.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us for this longer format version of the EchoStor Microsoft Minute. Well over a minute. We'll break these up probably in a little clips as well, so they're easily digestible. As always, if you have any ideas or things that you'd like for us to cover, you can reach us at the email that'll be splashed over the exit screen here. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Please keep an eye out for our next EchoStor Microsoft Minute. If you'd like more information about what we've discussed today or more about EchoStor, visit us at echostore.com. Thanks, everybody.